Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. In today's episode, we're talking about the Phils wasting a golden opportunity in New York versus the Mets. But I'll tell you why I still think they're in awesome shape for the postseason and for winning the NL East on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me for some of my other work in the sports talk space. I've been over on 97.5 The Fanatic, doing radio over there, talking all Philly sports for 5 years. I've been a 3 years credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member, and this is my third season as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, and subscribing to the YouTube. All that stuff really helps us out here on Locked On Phillies if you enjoy the content. And today's episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.com, Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. The Philadelphia Phillies have already booked their trip, shout out Booking.com, to the postseason, but unfortunately over the weekend, they were not able to get the job done in New York against the Mets, and they wasted a golden opportunity last night. They had some real chances in the series last night. They get 5 hit. They only score 1 run. They get an unlucky bounce in the 9th inning, and they waste a Zack Wheeler start that was flat out outstanding. Like, when you look at that series against the Mets, I didn't think the Philadelphia Phillies were I didn't think they played awful baseball. I didn't see that and say, man, they got totally smoked when they really needed to take advantage. They did in the Taijuan Walker game, but Taijuan Walker, I've told you many times how I feel about him. He should not be pitching at the major league level right now. But the rest of the team, I think it was an okay series. They just came up short a couple of times. Outside of that first game where they got completely smoked, then they completely smoked the Mets in game 2. They lost 6-3 in game 3, which is they had opportunities in that game. They just couldn't cash in enough. And then against the Mets last night, Brandon Nimmo hits a home run, and they were a weird bounce off a bag away from tying that game up in the 9th. Bryson Stott steals 3rd. The throw goes directly off the front of the bag and pops directly up into the air, so Stott couldn't advance the home. And Zack Wheeler was dominant, which it sucks wasting a great Zack Wheeler start, right? It sucks when you get a guy that goes out there and throws 7 innings. He did allow 7 hits, but only 2 earned runs, 1 walk, 8 strikeouts, and he gets the loss. Not only if he gets the no decision or you don't win the game, he gets the loss. That's just, it bothers me. It does, because I know the amount of effort that goes into that, and I know Zack Wheeler wants to put together a Cy Young caliber season, and whether or not they should matter, wins and losses do somewhat affect the way people vote for that. And he had an outstanding start. I think he should be the National League Cy Young winner. Even though Chris Sale is fully deserving down there in Atlanta, I think Zack Wheeler should be equally in the conversation, knowing what he did for a team that's going to be in the postseason. And Atlanta still has a chance to make it in, but I don't know. I'm also super, super, super biased, 100% biased. I want Zack Wheeler to win the Cy Young, but he was amazing last night. I don't think it bothers him any more than the average pitcher when you go out there and you do your best and your team doesn't back you up. I mean, he's had plenty of support from his teammates this year. They've hit well in games that he's pitched, and it happens when you go out there and you make a bunch of starts. He's got a 16-7 record, and he's made more starts than that had no decisions. So you're going to be bound to have some games where the offense doesn't click for the Philadelphia Phillies, and that is what it is. What's a little bit more concerning is 0-4 from Kyle Schwarber, 0-4 from Bryce Harper, but you had some other stars picking up, right? Trey Turner had a 2-hit ball game with a run scored, the only run for the Philadelphia Phillies. Nick Castellanos, a 2-hit ball game. Alec Boehm, 1-for-4, an RBI on that Trey Turner run scored. Now, it was early, and the Phillies scored in the top of the first and then did not score the rest of the way, so you almost felt like, hey, there could be a rout going on here. You could jump on them early in this game and take them out of it, but unfortunately, it was not meant to be for the Philadelphia Phillies. And I don't look at it and say, their approach stinks right now. I know they had 12 strikeouts last night. I know they've been striking out in bunches. Here's the thing. You can't make grand sweeping proclamations about this team based on recent performance. Are they hot going into the postseason? As of right now, I would not say yes. And I don't think it would be right to say yes. They've not been playing their best baseball. But We saw a stretch of the season for months earlier where they were unbelievable. Their approach worked great. They were one of the best offenses, if not the best offense in baseball. They were unstoppable. The pitching was awesome. And then we saw the slump where everything kind of fell apart. And then people started questioning the approach that had put them in such a good spot that they eventually would withstand that slump, come out on the other side, play good baseball again down the stretch. And now people are questioning the approach. It's the same approach, guys, all year long. It is the same team philosophy. I have not heard anything about them changing that. Individually, players may alter it based on their performance. And depending on the type of game and the way you're feeling about the pitcher you're facing, you could change the approach, or you should change the approach, I should say. But the overall team philosophy, it's not like they change it week to week, and that's why they have strikeout games. It's just, I don't know. They have guys in this lineup that strike out. Bryce Harper, for as good as he is, can be a strikeout guy. Brandon Marsh, huge strikeout guy. Kyle Schwarber, power hitter, strikeout guy. Nick Castellanos, strikeout guy. And that's not saying those guys are not good hitters. It's just some hitters have a tendency to, it's basically risk reward. I was watching a lot of football yesterday. I'm wearing my Eagles gear if you're not seeing it on the podcast. Good win for the Birds over the Saints yesterday down in New Orleans. Anyway, but it's like it's like a cornerback jumping a route in football. You got to look really good when you get an interception. A pick six changes a ball game. But when you jump that route and it's a double move and that guy's wide open, you're going to look like an idiot. It's risk reward. You could be the guy that waits 5 yards off the ball and just makes tackles all the time, but you won't make the big play. That's what the Phillies approach is for a lot of these guys. Hey, you might strike out. You might hit a ball 440 feet and change the course of a game. And in October, I've said this before on the podcast. I'll say it again as we draw closer to a red October coming up. In October, home runs might as well be worth 2, 3, 4 runs. I know some can be, but I'm talking about solo shots, because the momentum that can be created or taken away by a home run is monstrous. It's like an alley-oop in basketball. Still counts as 2 points, but when you get dunked into the earth's crust, you feel like they just scored 10. And the crowd goes nuts if you're at home. And you're like, man, that was not a good situation to be in. As opposed to if a guy just lays it up, you're like, I don't care. Same amount, but a different field. That's what the home run is when it comes to October. And this team can hit the ball out of the yard. I still firmly believe that. They're just fine. They're just wasting opportunities. I talked about it last week about how I'm just getting impatient. Lock up the division, move on to the focus of a top 2 seed. I want the Phillies to check off these boxes as quickly as possible so that they can set everything up. That top 2 seed setup is not guaranteed for them. The magic number for that we'll talk about coming up in a little bit, but they're in a situation where they still could conceivably be playing in the wild card series against one of the 3 other teams that make it in with the new playoff structure. I'm still thinking just 2 wildcard teams. Bottom line is, you want to lock down that first round bye to get yourself the time to rest. You can't treat that like you have that, because the next thing you know, you're going to be playing for your life in a 3-game series at Citizens Bank Park, and that is not ideal. In fact, they haven't even locked up the division yet, and you thought they were going to be able to up in New York. All they needed to do was split that series with the Mets 2 games apiece, and instead they lost 3 of 4, which it doesn't concern me about the postseason. It doesn't. One of those losses came from Taijuan Walker being terrible, and that's not going to happen in the postseason. If anything, it was 2-1, which in a wild card series is enough to win it. But in a 5-game series is not nearly enough, and those games are up at Citi Field, which credit to the Mets fans, which I don't say often. The environment up there at Citi Field was really good during this series. It had a playoff type of feel, because that's essentially what the stakes were for the Mets. A little bit lower stakes for the Phillies, considering they're already in. But I don't know. I just see that as, I don't see it as this major issue with the team. I didn't see anything where I was like, that scares me for October. What I did see is a team that missed some opportunities to close things out as quickly as they should have against a team that I think they're better than in the New York Mets. But end of the day, it doesn't kill you, right? Nothing kills you at this point. You're in the postseason already, but you can make your road significantly easier if you find a way to clinch more than just the postseason, but the division, a top 2 seed, and now a game back from the Dodgers for the 1 seed. Well, that makes that a little bit more complicated as well. But the pitching is still going well. The offense is still showing flashes. They're striking out a little bit right now, but hey, I'm going to throw this out there just as the mind-numb Philadelphia Phillies fan that I am. You know how Philadelphia sports works. We're always trying to come up with these rationalizations for why weird stuff is happening, and who knows. But there's always seems to be this feel of Philadelphia sports that you can't really explain, where they're losing this game or know they're winning that game based on things that have nothing to do with the sport. This may exist with other fan bases, but just kind of my feeling on the Phillies right now, and it's not based on anything. And I know it's stupid, so don't rip me apart for this. It's not like I'm actually saying this is the case, but I am saying, for all those people worried about, oh, the bat's going cold in October and I'm striking out a bunch and what happened against Arizona last season. Hey, maybe they're getting it out of the way now. Maybe they said, let's just do that in September. And then once October rolls around, we'll lock in. The whole feeling that the Phillies can't flip a switch is crazy to me, considering we've seen them do it 2 years in a row. They did not go into the postseason like red hot either of the last 2 years, and they went to the World Series and NLCS. I'm not breaking news to you. This team is built for October. Dave Dombrowski is the king of building rosters for October, and I believe he's done it again with this Phillies team. So the key is lock down what you need to and get in with the excuse me there, a little sneeze. I must be allergic to the postseason like the Philadelphia Phillies seem to be right now. But no, they're going to take care of business, and I hope in October. But getting there is it's all you really need to do, and locking it down. Getting there as far as like surviving these next couple weeks or next couple series, I should say. This season's getting real short. I'm not saying just getting in is okay. I'm saying you just have to survive and play your type of baseball, and you will take care of business in the division. You will take care of business and be a top 2 seed. And I'll tell you why I feel so confidently in that when we come back, or when we do this next segment, because we're going to talk about clinching scenarios where the Philadelphia Phillies stand. So we'll talk about that coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. But let's talk about Booking.com first. Booking.com is awesome. You can explore those U.S. cities you always secretly want to learn more about. Other baseball cities, your rival cities. Phils were just up in New York. I had some buddies that went up there and hung out in New York for the night. Fun city. Hate the baseball teams, but it is a fun time. The other cities in division, Marlins down in Miami, Atlanta, Washington, there's history, there's nightlife, there's party towns. There's so many options, and you want to sneak in there, you can go ahead and go to a rival city. I won't blame you. There's some cool places as long as you use Booking.com to check it out. They deliver exactly the right type of stay for you. Booking.com can help you book a stay that's close to your home team's or rival stadium. They can figure out exactly where you want to stay and all of that stuff, and compare a whole bunch of things to make sure that you're getting all set for the perfect vacation. So go ahead and find the right stay that can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals, with Booking.com. Booking.yeah. Also want to talk about our friends over at FanDuel. They have a great promotion running right now. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, those live bets, they can make all the difference. I love live betting with FanDuel. I love checking in on the app over the course of the game and say, well, I know what the score is right now, but I've got this vibe from watching the game. I've got this vibe from sitting here. This team feels like they are losing by more than what the score would indicate. This team feels like, hey, they have some momentum building that maybe the odds makers did not take account for. Hey, I think it's a fun way to win. When you get that hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets when you use the FanDuel app. And you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet with FanDuel. You got to go ahead and take advantage of that deal. Think about it. You place your first $5 bet. Hey, maybe you even win that. You make a little bit of money. I won a $5 bet on FanDuel this weekend betting on the Birds. Then you get those $200 in bonus bets and you load up on other things you want to try. You don't even have to worry about the risk. FanDuel is the best. Go ahead and check them out. That's FanDuel.com or check out the app on the App Store. All right, let's have a little bit of a discussion about clinching scenarios, the magic numbers for the Philadelphia Phillies. A quick reminder on magic numbers, if you weren't here the last time that I explained this. Basically what it is it's built on the distance between you and the team that you're trying to eliminate from also reaching that spot. So like for the division right now, it's built on the New York Mets and the gap between them and the Philadelphia Phillies, which got a little bit tighter this weekend. Now in the division, the difference in games is only 5 between the Phillies and the Mets. But the good news is there's only 6 games left, and the Phillies have tiebreaker. So what that means is if you go ahead and take care of one game, the magic number is 1, you win one game the rest of the way, you are NL East division champs. If the Mets lose one game the rest of the way, you are NL East division champs. The Mets going down to Atlanta for a huge series down there against the Braves for them, trying to figure out who's going to make it into the postseason as a wild card team because the Phils are locking down the division. You play the Cubs. We're talking about that in the final segment. They've given up on their season. They've been eliminated. They're an 80-win team, sure, on paper, but they're just playing out the rest of the season before they can go golf. You can get a win tonight. The Mets could possibly lose to the Braves tonight. I mean, the Braves still a solid team, still fighting for postseason contention. They have something to play for. You're in a spot where you should still lock up the division quickly as early as tonight. So one game is all you need to win for the NL East the rest of the way. Or again, like your opponent that's chasing you loses one, that's another one off the magic number. There's no halves like in the game standings. No, magic number of 1 means any loss by the Mets, any win by the Phils, it's over. And you can put on the caps and the shirts, NL East 2024 champions. That would be great. I expect that to happen tonight because I don't think the Phils are losing to the Cubs. And the Mets also could lose to the Braves and just help them out anyway, even if you do lose. So I don't think both those things are going to happen. The Mets win and the Cubs win. But the other thing that's interesting is the magic number for the top 2 seed has also gone down a little bit. The Phils have the tiebreaker over the Milwaukee Brewers, and that number is now to 3. Now, the Phillies are only 3 games up on the Brewers, but remember, they have the tiebreaker over them as well. And you're looking at a situation then where if the Phillies win a game, knock one off that. If the Brewers lose a game, knock one off that. The Brewers are in Pittsburgh taking on the Pirates for 3 games, and then they round out with the Mets. And that's why that this is so great, because the Mets are a solid team, and that will help the Phillies in any case in that final series to put them in a good spot. We need the Mets to be playing for a lot of something there, and I think they will be. Well, they kind of have to be unless they somehow eliminate the Braves by sweeping them down there in Atlanta. The Brewers are not going to win as many games as the Philadelphia Phillies. I feel very confident in saying that. Remember, the Phils, they got 3 against the Cubs and then 3 against the Nationals. They have the easiest finishing schedule of any of the teams chasing them down that could actually conceivably catch them. So 3, the magic number for Phillies Brewers. And if you get that, you will be a top 2 seed. Now, you're a game back on the Dodgers. The Dodgers' remaining schedule is 3 against the Padres starting tomorrow night. They have the day off today. But then 3 against the Rockies, which you can't really count on Colorado to steal any of those, even though they did just take a game from the 3-game series those teams just played in LA. And those games are at Coors Field, meaning if you live in the greater Denver area, look out for Shohei Ohtani baseballs. They could be coming into orbit. Bottom line is you have a situation where the Dodgers have a tougher series than you, the Mets have a tougher series than you, the Brewers have a tougher series than you left on the schedule. And if you catch the Dodgers and you end up tied, like I said, tiebreaker. Phillies beating the National League opponents, that's great. They also, I saw a great graphic on, it might have been the Apple TV Friday night broadcast. It might have been last night on Sunday Night Baseball. Whatever the case may be, the Phillies have the best record among National League teams when facing other National League playoff opponents. Yeah, tell me again at the start of the year how they can't beat winning baseball teams. Turns out the Phillies are just about the best of the best. So I don't know. Where do I expect them to clinch the 2 seed? I'd expect them to do it against the Chicago Cubs. I think, and here's my reasoning, and I think the Phillies are going to win. I'll tell you more coming up next, but 2 out of 3 games against the Cubs because that 5th spot in the rotation comes back up again this series, and I can't count any of those games. But do I expect the Brewers to win all 3 against the Pirates on the road in Pittsburgh? I know the Pirates don't have much to play for, but that's a division matchup, and they want to play for pride. Yeah, sure. I would love to see that, and I think it's certainly possible. I'm looking right now to see if the Brewers face Paul Skeens at all in this series against the Pirates. I don't believe they do. They do not. So that would have been nice to see. But when you look at it, the Phillies are just in so much better position because of the way the scheduling shakes out to get to a spot where they can lock up the first round bye. Like, I'm close to a CT guarantee at this point. The division is already CT guaranteed. You can stamp that. You can put it on. As far as the magic number 3 for the first round bye, I'll feel much better when the Philadelphia Phillies lock up the division. Rob Thompson, by the way, has already said too, he said if it comes to the clinching scenario, but I'm going to say when, because they're going to win the division. When they do, everyone's going to be out there the next day. There is no hangover game like they had last year when they clinched and they had nothing to play for a couple of days. No, there's no hangover game because you're fighting for a top seed in all of baseball, not just in the National League. So if you're worried about that, I wouldn't be. This team is still focused on more than just the division, and they're getting geared up for October. And I know they wasted an opportunity in New York like we talked about, but I like the spot that they're in right now. I really and truly and honestly do, because they've been throwing the ball well. They've been showing a little bit of pop. I know they've been striking out, but they've been fielding the ball pretty darn well. Yeah, I think they're in a spot where they're as primed as anybody for October, even teams that have been red hot, like the New York Mets, who you just played. The team you're playing coming up, though, they're not red hot. We're going to preview the series with the Cubs coming up next and talk about what should be. Should be. Again, I'll say should, because baseball, weird things happen. A very comfortable, easy series for the Phillies to wrap up just about everything they need to. We'll discuss that coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Let's talk about Prize Picks, though. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. They got over 5 million active members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. You just get more than or less than on any of the millions of, I may be over-exaggerating, millions, but there's so many different player stat options, player stat projections. You think they'll get more than that number? Pick more. Less. See, it's simple. Even an idiot like me can do it. And I can put it together, the lineup, Prize Picks, in like 60 seconds, maybe a little bit less depending on the day if I know what I want to go for. It's quick, it's easy, and you can make a good amount of money. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. So tonight, Phil's Cubs. I don't know, more than on Aaron Nola's strikeouts, more than on Bryce Harper's hits, Trey Turner's hits, who went 2 for 4 last night against the Mets, and then maybe look at Kyle Schwarber and see if you can get more walks, more hits, whatever. I think the top of the lineup has a big night tonight to set the tone for the Phillies. You do all that, and plus download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB, and you'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. So check out Prize Picks. Run your game with Prize Picks. All right, let's look at this Cubs series. Like I said, I mean, the Cubs, they're just not that good of a baseball team. They aren't. They're solid. Oh, and real quick, if you want to learn more about what's going on around Major League Baseball in a huge time of the year, I gave you a little bit of a rundown on the show, but thank you for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. Now make Locked On MLB your next listen with Sully, Paul Francis Sullivan, the host of that show. It's available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. They're also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And he's giving you storylines for all of baseball as the postseason draws closer. He doesn't focus on one specific team, just one specific sport, America's pastime. And it's one that you definitely need to be zoned in on everything that's going on right now. The Cubs, they're zoned out. They're ready to go play golf. They've been eliminated from postseason contention, divisional contention, everything. Their season is, for all intents and purposes, over. They're an 80-win baseball team, which is not a pushover by any stretch of the imagination. In past years, they might still be alive, but this year, there are just a lot of teams right in that upper 80s, low 90s range that the Cubs have been eliminated. So they have nothing to play for. They're going to play stuff out because of respect for the sport, and that's the way all teams should honestly be. It's not the NFL where you can tank for a #1 overall pick that changes your organization. Now, the Cubs are going to try, but they're just not as good as the Phillies, and they don't have as much motivation. That's why the Phillies are minus 190 on the money line. They have a 64.7% chance to win, according to ESPN Analytics. Aaron Nola takes the mound tonight with a chance to clinch at home after getting that major new contract. Love that. He re-signs. He could be the guy that clinches the division tonight with a win. Ooh, how awesome would that be? I would love to see that at Citizens Bank Park and see the celebration that goes on down at the Yard this evening. He's going to be facing off against Nate Pearson. Now, Nate Pearson has got a 4.71 ERA, a 1.33 whip, and 63 innings pitched. A 2-2 record. He's not a guy that's done anything all that crazy. In 63 innings, he's given up 12 home runs. So that means, by my quick math, He's given up one every, 5 innings? You should probably go yard off of him tonight. And you have an opportunity against this righty to get into a situation where you could put up a lot of runs early. That ERA shows it, right? He doesn't give up all that many base runners, but he does give up bombs. He gives up hard contact. Bring it up again. 71 strikeouts in 63 innings pitched. He's one of those guys that can case some people a little bit. He's got solid stuff. His problem is just like locating and elevating, and you can go ahead and at Citizens Bank Park get in a lot of trouble by doing that. But you have a great opportunity against Nate Pearson tonight if you're the Philadelphia Phillies lineup, and that should be something the Phillies take advantage of. Looking at some of the top names you need to know on offense for the Cubs, Ian Happ is leading their team in homers and RBIs, 25 home runs, 85 RBIs. Kyle Schwarber has 36 homers and 99 RBIs to lead the Phillies, so you can see the gap between those guys. Schwarber's next RBI will be his 100th, by the way. Leadoff bomb for Kyle Schwarber in that series against the Mets to add to his total. And then average, Trey Turner is leading the Phillies at 298. Seiya Suzuki at 279 is leading the Cubs. They don't have anyone batting 280 or above that's a qualified batter. So, yeah, you are better than this team. It's not that deep. And you're better than this team in the series, right? Like, let's look at some of the other matchups that are going on between the Phillies and the Cubs in this series. Game 2 is going to be that interesting fifth starter situation. You're facing Justin Steele, who's been one of the best pitchers for the Chicago Cubs this year, a 3.03 ERA. That's probably the one that you drop if you drop any. But then once you go past that, you get Christopher Sanchez on the mound, and he'll be facing Javier Assad to round out the series. Assad's been good, but Sanchez has been better, and that's a great situation to be in if you're the Phillies because, again, another righty that you can get hopefully a hold of. You're seeing a lefty in the middle of the series. So it's almost like you punt on the middle game of this series, which you know would be great. You win tonight, you clinch. Everybody plays hungover tomorrow. You go out there, you try and make some magic happen, and if you don't, whatever, you regroup and you go ahead and you win the series on Wednesday. And you set yourself up in a situation to make a push for that 2 seed in the final series against the Nationals. That should be a very, very winnable series. So that's where I see it as far as the matchup with the Cubs. The other thing I would like to see, like honestly, I know I brought it up earlier in this episode, the strikeout issues. I know the pitching's going to be good. I know the bullpen's going to be good. I know the fielding's going to be good enough. But what I am seeing people complain about, and I've already brought it up, I think it's valid to be annoyed by them striking out double-digit times in a game. But I do think it's something that happens when you're a more aggressive baseball team. I would like to see them cut down on that against the Cubs. Just put the ball in play. Don't try and do too much. Don't try and press for – you remember when I talked about how they were wasting time clinching the postseason? Because sometimes when you get right up against the milestone, it feels like the pressure mounts and you just don't handle things the same way. I think that's what's happening now with the division as well, and they feel how close they are, and they're like, okay, I'm trying to hit the big home run that'll be remembered as, hey, that's how we won the NL East. Guess what, folks? I think the Phillies are going to accomplish a lot more than just winning the NL East this year. Who cares how they do it? If it's small ball, it's small ball. But cut down on the strikeouts. Make everybody feel better about the way you're approaching your at-bats at the plate heading into October. Start to tighten up a little bit to what is the postseason caliber team I believe this Phillies team to be. Like, that's the number one thing I want to see in this series, outside of course, clinching the NL East, which we're going to be celebrating the second they do. I want to see them cut down on the strikeouts, even though I don't think it's an October problem, or I don't hope it's an October problem. I guess it's more hope than think at this point, especially after last year's postseason. Can't believe we're still talking about it. Yes, that's on me. I'm only talking to myself out here, talking to you guys too, of course, but I mean, there's no one forcing me to say that. But bottom line is I want to see them cut down on that in the series against the Cubs, because the pitchers that you are facing are not the quality of the pitchers that you're going to be seeing in the postseason when you get to that point. So some goals for clinching, some goals for the series itself, and some opportunity with a team that doesn't have much to play for in the Chicago Cubs. I would hate for the Cubs to play spoiler, dear city of Chicago. I mean, I like to think Philadelphia and Chicago are somewhat kindred spirits with tortured fan bases and everything like that. You guys are out already. Throw us a bone. Let us win a couple. You don't have to let us. The Phillies are a good enough team. But I'm just throwing that out in the universe to say, hey, give us a hand. All right? City of brotherly love. That's us. But you could show some brotherly love and show up and just mail it in these games if you really want to, since you're not playing for anything. Either way, I think it's CT guarantee. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to guarantee a win tonight and a division title tonight. I do think they do it, but I'm not going to guarantee it because I need to see this team put together a little bit more of a consistent offensive approach right now as they round out the regular season. But I think they're going to snap into gear once Red October gets here. That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Tomorrow, hopefully, we're talking about a division championship. That would be amazing. That show is going to be, it might be a champagne and goggles type of show tomorrow if that does indeed happen tonight. But we'll see. We'll see how it all plays out. Either way, we're going to be recapping tonight's game, looking at clinching scenarios, and pushing closer to Red October on tomorrow's episode. That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff. And I'll talk to you tomorrow, hopefully with champagne and goggles on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.